You there?
Yeah, I'm looking at the back office here. Now, you got into the website today, correct?
Yeah, I was able to get in. Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to publish a blog. You and I did that extrication audio the other day, audio video. It wasn't that much video, but it actually created some good feedback. There's some good questions and things that came out of this. At least 3 good comments. And before I get into that, hold on. Okay, can you see my screen now? You should be in screen share mode.
Second. Yeah, I
Message
can.
waiting. Food Safety Act. Message go away. Okay, you can see the screen.
Yes. It's real small. Did you fit it real? Did you minimize it real small?
It's because I'm covering such a wide field.
Yeah, it's in a microscopic look. I'm not looking. You know what I mean? It's microscopic. I can't really see it as a full picture.
Is your screen full screen?
Hold on. Okay, there we go. Now I can see it.
Well, I just
Yeah,
shrunk
I
it
can
down
see
so that you can just see the part in here. What I want to do is a little bit, rather than me typing out this next blog, because this is called Extricate 2, and I just want to address the issues or questions that were raised as a little bit of a better explanation. There was good comments that came out of this, and I'll kind of go over that with you just a second. This came from Franklin, and he's a member, and he said, you mentioned the different talks that because we are in the banking system, we are trustees of or for the system, and the reason for being subjected to the tax code, there is and this is the reason for being subjected to the tax code. Okay, this is true. It's a private contract with the bank. And IRS, you mentioned in an email you just sent to me, Title 26 is not positive law, but you have a contract with the bank, and if you go look at the bank account agreements and understand what I did in Banking 101 Part A, still think it's your money, then you'll understand that it's the bank's money. Their depositories of public money. You become their trustee on the account, and you look at the deposit slip. You're not subjected to anything. This is by agreement. You went to get the account. You've agreed to the terms and conditions of the account. If you look at the account holder agreement, it says that your position with the bank is that of debtor and creditor. All of this was in Banking 101A. Still think it's your money because it's the account agreement that runs the account. It says that either party can cancel the agreement anytime. You can pull your funds out. They can withhold your funds. They can cancel the account. They can do all kinds of things. They're not going to warn you if they do any kind of grand jury subpoena. They're not going to tell you anything. They can do whatever they want to with the account because it's not your account, it's their account. They are depository of the public money. You are not the depository. You're the trustee managing the deposit of public money. And it says that you're subjected to the UCC and the provisions thereof and to any bank collection agreements. So you have to know the UCC and you have to know the bank collection agreements. So his point is that yes, this is true. I've mentioned this on different talks. There's an author, Peter Hendrickson, who wrote the book Cracking the Code. Yes, I debated with Mr. Hendrickson probably 5-6 years ago, wherein he told the people that back then that I didn't know what I was talking about and I was stupid and he had constitutional rights. And let's go down and read this. His approach to the income taxes, not from a constitutional point of view, but from an actual code. To date, tens of thousands of people have followed the filing procedure he teaches and gotten their taxes back, including Social Security and Medicare. Well, you have to understand it's all computerized. Somebody's flipping the switch, or it's flipping the switch when it goes in based on what's coming in on that form. Well, they can correct that form later. They can correct the fact that they paid you any money later. They can go into your account and rip it right back out. And this happened even in the 90s with the Montana Freeman because they had something like people getting funds back in 26 states doing the same process that Mr. Hendrickson thinks he's teaching that he came up with that was he thought was new, which was not new. It was old and it didn't work then and it's not working now. That people have gotten funds back, okay. That doesn't mean that they did it correctly, and it doesn't mean it's the form that the system is looking for. They're saying $11 million in refunds. The basic premise of his study of the Code of State and Federal Employees and Public Officials that the only ones subjected to the income tax. And from what I've read, and I can understand, that seems to be the case. Because of a bank account or other contracts, we are classified as federal employees and don't know it. And there's a question mark there. Yes, that's correct. The bank is a financial agent of the government. Since it's a financial agency of the government and you have the account, you're their sub-agent. That's it. Pete has been convicted and put into prison at this time for his refusal to change his tax return and swearing under penalty of perjury that he is a federal employee and received income as such. When you read the transcripts of the case, your information that prosecutors and judges can do what they want rings true. They're operating on the contract, which is what I wrote him back. Contract is the citizenship contract. That's what the prosecutors and judges are doing. The immunity of the prosecutors and judges extends from the sovereign power of the United States, so that they have sovereign immunity underneath their agency position as the U.S., because they extend it who they want to extend it to. Okay, let's see. There was a separate email here. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Any questions about that, Nico?
No, that was good.
Okay. We being channeled from birth. Oh, sorry, can't read that. Let it go away. From birth into economic servitude. Well, here we go again. Let me move this down a little bit, and I won't have this problem. Or up. Oh, here we go. Into economic servitude to the international creditors through a system of total fraud and misrepresentation. That's number one. Number two, changing citizenship like a cow changing farmers is no remedy because the leadership of the nation states of all the worlds support the same international public order. Yes, that was in the blog I did at Intervention in International Law, where it says all nations are agents of the law of nations to enforce international law in the territorial jurisdiction over which they hold sway. It's the fraud perpetrated by the international creditors and world leaders that impels us to assert our rights of self-determination by declaring and stating for the reasons for claiming this our independence to a candid world. Yes, follow the pattern. The pattern was the Declaration of Independence. They said you have to state the reasons that impel you to break those political bands that have tied you together. Do what they did. They did it, right? They formed a new state, those 55 men. And they pledged their life, fortune, and honor to build it, to each other, to build it. And they didn't pledge to everybody that wasn't interested in what they were doing, and that was the majority of the people that were here, those that liked remaining subjects of the king. And you have to understand, Nico, they were barely coming out of the doctrine of the divine right of kings back then anyway.
Right.
If you read any of the writings of Patrick Henry and the Virginia Resolves and different things, I mean, they were very diplomatic in their decorum about His Majesty the King. Questions. Is there a difference between international law and the international public order? Technically, no, but a lot of international law extends directly from the treaties that they sign. So the international public order is the maintenance of those treaties and maintaining this public order over the territorial jurisdiction. And when you're dealing with debtors and the debt keeps escalating and the insecurity of the international creditors to actually have that debt paid starts escalating, then they start putting more and more controls in place to make sure that it's a lockdown on the fact that they're going to get whatever it is as far as offset and adjustment on this debt. Now, we know it's never going to be paid, but that's irrelevant because that's not necessarily the agenda anymore. Is the international public order the fraud? No, it's not. It's not the fraud at all. Nothing wrong with having order. Am I correct in saying that a new state created in pursuit of the right of self-determination could or should support a different international public order? If so, what different international public order do you suggest and how will it interact from the old? Well, if you become the state and you pledge to and you form your own state, you're going to create your own order within your own state. And as long as you're not offending another state and innocence of another state or whatever, if you're signed on to the treaties for genocide but you start genociding your own people or each other, then the international community could have a problem with that based on intervention in international law and the rules of reason. And quit, my thing, Nico, is quit blaming governments. This is about people. Nobody forces a 26-year-old to pull the trigger to drop a bomb and kill 50,000 people. No one's forced to do that. It's the decision of the individual.
Hold on 1 second, because this battery's about to die. Let me make sure I plug this cord in, okay?
Okay.
Sorry, I had to attend some stuff here. And get this plugged back in as well. Okay, I'm back. Go ahead.
Okay, let's go back to this question about do the UN and other international organizations largely support the fraud, or don't they? Well, they do, but there again, let's take a minute and let's say, okay, who's actually responsible for accepting the fraud? Let's look at pure contract. If somebody's lying to you and you identify them as a liar because you do your due diligence, because you study to show yourself approved, because you understand that ignorance is no excuse, and that people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, or any of those kind of maxims that you want to talk about, then whose responsibility is it to not buy into a lie and thereby create a deceiver? Because until you bought it and had contract with the lie, there was no deception, there was no deceiver. There was a lie and a liar. Correct?
Right.
I know people don't like to look at it that way because they don't like the fact that they're participating. So they're seeking not to be, quote, under some sort of judgment because they got lied to. And the problem with it is that ignorance is no excuse. And it's the principles are in law, and they're in a lot of the things that people say that they believe, although they don't believe what they say they believe. Otherwise, they'd have no problem with what I just said, because I can guarantee you there's at least 2 billion people who claim to believe what I just said. At least that. Or at least it's allegedly reported that there's about 2 billion like that, okay? So if you look at what the real problem is, in my opinion, I'm going to go into something called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. Have you read this little pamphlet they put up online?
What, about the silent weapons?
Yes.
Well, I've read that article before in Bill Cooper's material.
Right. Well, there's a part specifically in here which talks about human nature, because these guys are students of human nature. That's how they know how to control it, okay? This is the artificial womb. From the time a person leaves his mother's womb, its every effort is directed toward building, maintaining, and withdrawing into artificial wombs, various forms of substitute protective devices or shells. That's why people do trust, okay? It appears to be a shell. The nation state is the bigger shell. It's the ultimate asset protection program, which is why those that do it for themselves and their posterity. The objective of these artificial wombs is to provide a stable environment for both stable and unstable activity, to provide shelter for evolutionary process of growth and maturity, i.e. survival, to provide security for freedom, and to provide defensive protection for offensive activity. This is equally true of both the general public and the elite. However, there is a definite difference in the way each of these classes goes about the solution to the problem. I just mentioned how they go about the solution to the problem. They build nation states, turn them into slave plantations, so the slaves are now locked down, can't come against them, because they're as bothered by the chaos as everybody else. And so their thing is, it's a karmic deal, the golden rule. You like chaos, you get chaos. You want to support war, you get war.
Right.
I didn't create the golden rule either, okay? So, and neither did they, by the way, and so that's their kind of attitude about it. You just kind of have to understand that the elite, and the way that they, even though the period of times and the kings of Europe and the nobility or whatever, they've got a sheer disdain for people, for the lower classes and the public, but they're looking at, you know, being in league with, for lack of a better way of saying this, I live in the South, it's called Joe's Six Pack, okay? And right. This is why the vote doesn't count, Nico. The vote doesn't count. They vote for president. They think it counts. They're
right.
not letting...
It's like no different than voting for the president of Exxon or British Petroleum. That's all you're voting for.
They're not letting Joe Six-Pack have a say-so in the most powerful positions on the planet. His life revolves around beer and monster truck rallies and wrestling. The political structure of a nation, dependency. The primary reason why individual citizens of a country create a political structure is a subconscious wish or desire to perpetuate their own dependency relationship of childhood. Simply put, they want a human god to eliminate all risk from their life, pat them on the head, kiss their bruises, put a chicken on every dinner plate, clothe their bodies, tuck them into bed at night, and tell them that everything will be all right when they wake up in the morning. This public demand is incredible. So the human god, the politician, meets this incredibility with incredibility by promising the world and delivering nothing. So who is the bigger liar? The politician or the public? The public behavior is surrender, born of fear, laziness, and expediency. It is the basis of the welfare state as a strategic weapon, and is very useful against a disgusting public. Now you know how they feel about it.
Right.
Action offense. Most people want to be able to subdue or kill other human beings which disturb their daily lives, but don't want to have to cope with the moral or religious issues which such an overt act on their part may raise. Therefore they assign the dirty work to others, including their own children, and send them off to war so that they can keep the blood off their hands. They rave about humane treatment of animals, then sit down to a delicious hamburger from a whitewashed slaughterhouse down the street and out of sight. But even more hypocritical, they pay taxes to finance a professional association of hitmen called politicians, and then complain about corruption in government.
Right.
responsibility. This is the thing. Get into this in just a second, because Joey's become a pretty good writer on my website, and he is a prolific studier. I mean, there ain't no laziness in Joey at all.
Yeah, that's actually my best talent is writing. I'm really good at dissecting paragraphs and breaking it down into simple.
Well, you get that way over time if you start studying this kind of thing, because you start learning what they call the legalese. You start learning how that if you understand that you're bound up by contracts, and the only way you're going to get unbound is to understand the contracts.
Right.
Again, most people want to be free to do things, to explore, etc., but they are afraid to fail. This fear of failure is manifested in irresponsibility, especially in delegating those personal responsibilities to others, where success is uncertain or carries a possibility or created liabilities, law, which a person is not prepared to accept. They want authority, the root word Arthur, but they will not accept responsibility or liability, so they hire politicians to face reality for them. They want to be represented. And in the United States, for those that don't believe that, okay, that applies to me, that doesn't apply to me, I'm not that way, I bust my rear, I do all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I did too, okay? But I had to realize that in international law, when you start breaking it down, let me pull this up. I wanted to go into this thing I mentioned to you earlier about the 7th International Conference of American States. Because we're specifically talking about nationality. And some of the questions here have been very, very good. And the one that started this was very good. So if we're talking about leaving one jurisdiction, and what I mentioned about nationality is that a lateral transfer from being a citizen to a citizen is just a lateral transfer. That's not exercising self-determination. It's just a dodge. You're trying to get out of Dodge, to dodge getting out of Dodge or whatever, so that you're somewhere else because you think this one over here is better than that one over there, or you may have a little more freedom over there, or you're just trying to hide your assets over there, or what you think are your assets that the king is allowing you to have while you have them. I'll get into that in a second too. This was in page 63 of this on nationality. Is something I want to point out here about the exercise of self-determination and going through what people think that they can even do, like the subject of duality. I'm a dual citizen of wherever. Now, this is out of the 7th International Conference of American States on nationality. And Article 1 and 2 are the only things I'm going to read here. It says that the naturalization of an individual before the competent authorities of any signatory states carries with it the loss of nationality of origin. What does that tell you about duality right there?
I'm sorry, say that again?
You see Article 1?
Yeah, Article 1, naturalization of an individual before the competent authorities of any signatory states carries it with the loss of nationality.
What does that say about duality and being a dual citizen?
Saying, in other words, once you become of another, you lose citizenship. So dual citizen really does not exist.
Okay. The state.
Now, where did you find this?
It's in the 7th International Conference of American States.
Oh, that's why you keep bringing that up, because they say that right there in that international conference.
The point is they don't believe in duality. That's just a game that people want to play, and if they want to play it, they don't really care. If you want to go give Grenada $50,000 to be a dual citizen down there, Grenada's so happy to receive your money.
Right.
Thank you very much. How did that help you? It didn't help you. And if,
right.
and
so
if,
liable to both.
Yeah, and if Grenada didn't inform them, if you read Article 2, it says the state bestowing naturalization shall communicate this fact through diplomatic channels to the state to which the naturalized individual was a national. What if they don't inform the other state? Then you didn't lose the nationality of origin.
Right.
So you just gave him $50,000 for nothing, which is
right. If you're a dual national, if you're a national there and a national, if you're a dual national, then now you're liable to two masters instead of one.
Exactly, and if you look at the 6th International Conference of American States, which was 5 years before this one, it just says that foreigners in another territory enjoy the same privileges or civil rights that are granted, there's that word granted again, to the nationals in that jurisdiction. So if you go to Grenada, you go anywhere else, then you have the same rights as those people to have down there, as citizens and nationals, residents, aliens, it doesn't matter. There's no immunity in those positions.
So you're saying if you really want to be nationalized somewhere else, you need to lose the nationality. Otherwise, it's not really doing anything for you if you try to basically dual nationals that are sitting on the fence, or what kind of the point were you trying to stress with that?
Just that a lateral move is a lateral move. Being a citizen of one state is no different than being a citizen of another state.
Right, like you're saying that one farmer trading one farmer for another.
Any rights that stem from that come from that sovereign power that grants those rights. Therefore, you only have the rights that are granted. They are granted. They're not
right. So that's why it's imperative to set up your own nation instead of just making a lateral move.
The point is that it has nothing to do with self-determination, because self-determination is summed up in one sentence. You're assuming your separate and equal station among the powers of the earth to build a new state, a new society. Build it. Right. You become a builder, not somebody hiding out and somebody trying to sneak away, because they're doing away with the hide sneak program.
Right.
Now, I'll say this about Article 1 here. Naturalization of an individual before the competent authorities of, you may end up being the competent authority, and if you are, then and you are the state, then that's where your naturalization, like they did the Declaration of Independence, that's your stepping out when you pledge life, fortune, and sacred honor. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay. So let's see what it says here. Number 3, it appears to me that international law, like other categories of law, is not static. It has been interpreted differently over time. Well, international law is more or less the law of nature and nature's God, which is exactly why the founders of the United States of America put it in the Declaration of Independence. It is common law because it's common to the family of nations. It's the reason why it's important to read the law of nations and understand it. And one of the people on my website, we were talking just 2 days ago, he's been using the principles of dispute resolution in accordance with what he's been reading in the law of nations, and it's been working in all of his personal relationships.
Huh.
It's not static. It has been interpreted differently over time. Overt slavery was once a common practice and necessarily recognized in the inner workings of international law. The intervention in international law gives numerous examples. Today, it's economic slavery, and that is recognized and condoned. It's not condoned by me, but involuntary servitude was done away with. I'll agree with that, and international law has involved in that, so that this goes back to biblical principles, actually. Slavery was actually not, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, if you were born a slave, be a good one. And it was not a sin, or whatever you want to call it, not a violation of universal principles. But this difference of slavery versus bond servitude was it was a contract. You got into bond servitude because it was a job. You decided to be up under another master. And if you decided after 7 years not to leave your master, you didn't have to. A lot of people want masters. The reason they go to work for corporations is because, like it said in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, they're too fearful to go start their own business. They don't want to do the research to understand marketing and business trends enough to go have their own thing, to have their own business. So they believe in the corporate dream, and the corporate dream is a corporate nightmare because 97% of the people that are in that retire broke, and that's going to get worse. So, again, it's now voluntary servitude, not involuntary servitude, and your acquiescence is servitude. Your acquiescence to it is where they have the agreement. That's in Silent Weapons too. Let me go back and see if I can pull that up real quick. Summary about people hiring politicians so that they can obtain security without managing, obtain action without thinking about it, inflict theft and injury and death upon other people like Iraq or whatever without having to contemplate either life or death or anything that's going on over there, or what their impact is for the judgment that may come on them for being involved with the unrighteous king over there that's doing it anyway. Avoid the responsibility of their own intentions, obtain the benefits of reality and science without exerting themselves in the discipline or facing and learning either of these things. Exactly how many people are studying physics at a deep level, like I did when I was in the Navy's nuclear power program. And I don't study it a lot today because now the new science that I have to study is international law and how this all applies to not being up under their coattails voluntarily through my acquiescence just to lay down and accept it. They give the politician the power to create and manage a war engine to provide the survival of the nation or the womb, prevent encroachment of anything upon the nation or the womb, destroy any enemy who threatens the womb, and destroy those citizens of their own country who do not conform for the sake of the ability or the stability of the womb. Politicians hold quasi-military jobs, the lowest level being the police, which are the soldiers, the attorneys and CPAs who are next to spies and saboteurs, and the judges who shout orders and run the closed union military shop for whatever the market will bear, which means they're selling bonds out the back door for military projects, okay? The generals are the industrialists. The presidential level as commander-in-chief is shared by the international bankers and the people that they know that they have created this farce and financed it with their own taxes, which is consent. There you go, right there. You consented right here.
Consent, right.
But they would rather knuckle under than be a hypocrite, okay? I mean, God bless America. How dare you speak out? How dare you even try to get out? How dare you do that? What is your problem? You don't like us anymore? You don't like being an American? How dare you leave? It's kind of attitude I've gotten along the way for the past 4 years. You did what? Became an ambassador from other nations, some other nation state? What? I don't understand. Being an American citizen is the greatest thing on earth. Haven't you heard?
Yep.
Anyway, so thus a nation becomes divided into two distinct parts. A docile subnation, the great silent majority, and a political subnation. The political subnation remains attached to the docile subnation, tolerates it, and leeches its substance until it grows strong enough to detach itself and devour its parents. Devour the little parents that are feeding it, that wanted it to build into this. Okay? And the only reason I'm reading this is because they're telling you how they think about it. And quite frankly, I think they are correct. Because if you look at over time, at least they were willing, like those 55 men, to do something about it. And a lot of people like to thump and talk about what they did, but most people are not willing to emulate that. They're not willing to pledge their life, fortune, and sacred honor to build something new. And they even told them in that Declaration of Independence that, you know, when it becomes over time, you see this long train of abuses about somebody becoming despotic, it's time to throw off the old guard and build a new one. See, they got tired of petitioning the king. Don't people get tired of this every 4 years? They're going to have change, and every 4 years it gets worse. Don't they get tired of this? The reason it's gone on as long as it has here is they have an election every 4 years, and they did the same thing in Britain. They instituted this whole prime minister operation, and you know he's called the first among equals, and serves under the queen or the king or the throne or the crown or whatever you want to call it. Okay. So what was the architect told Neo about how the people accept the system as long as they're given a choice, even if it's at a rudimentary subconscious level where they don't even understand the choice. You remember that scene, right?
Yep, I remember.
From where do you draw the static, absolute, unchanging law, universal law? And that's mentioned in the Rule of Reason in that book, Intervention on International Law, the Rule of Reason. Some of these things should have been universal for a long time, but people bought into certain things. They bought into the divine right of kings, number one. They bought into the fact that, say, some man on this planet is the vicar of Christ. He's actually Christ on earth still, okay? And they say Christ is coming back, and it's like, no, he's already here. His representative's right there, see? Whatever paradigm they have, you know. I won't get into that. There's great, in all of the biblical books and the religious books and the scriptural books and all these higher order things that people live their lives by. It's like one of the people that's on my website, he told me one time, he said, I've read all the religious books. They all say the same thing. Don't be a jerk. But don't get me started about infallibility and inerrancy, because that, you know, there's certain paradigms that have to make sense to me. You know, honor being first and foremost. I mean, in my lifetime, what I've seen is that without honor, and people talk about, you know, unconditional love. Unconditional love without honor is not love. And it always leads to betrayal. Always. That's why you see, what is they say, well, the divorce rate here is, what, 50-60% now or whatever. Why? Because people can't honor an agreement. They have been programmed and bought the program and to do what we're talking about. And he's asking a very good question here. This is Richard, and I don't know who Richard is, but I really appreciate that. I've seen him in comments before, and there's a lot of good comments that come through the website now. I do believe there are laws that govern us, yet I doubt man's ability to accurately codify them at all. Well, you do it among yourself. This is the thing about the case, and I'll go in here real quick and we'll look at something called, there was a website called 1215.org, and I know I can find what I'm looking for real quick here, that says that at the revolution that the sovereignty devolved on the people, meaning those 55 men, that they're truly sovereigns of the country, but they're sovereigns without subjects. Well, how could they be without subjects? You got all these citizens here. How's that possible? All these subjects from Britain all of a sudden became what? Sovereigns? No, they did not. They didn't pledge. And those that did pledge didn't care about those that didn't, because they were running companies and those people were working for them. And in addition to that, they had slaves. But it says that they were sovereigns without subjects, with none to govern but themselves. Okay, well, that's an ideal situation to be in. That's what you really want. You come together as a group and you self-govern. You govern among yourself. You are the state. And all of those together of like mind. Does it have to be big? No. 55 men, 39 men. And there's other nation states that have done it with less. Now, you see in here, too, there's a nice little big fat semicolon there, right? It means they're changing the thought of the next thing they're going to say. Out of this Chisholm versus Georgia case, it says that the citizens of America, which at that time would have been British American citizens, British American, if you read the Virginia Resolves that were written by Patrick Henry, they're equal as fellow citizens and as joint tenants in the sovereignty. You see this?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. What's a tenant?
And as joint tenants in the sovereignty, Chisholm versus Georgia.
And what's a tenant?
Tenant is like basically a renter.
So that tells you the status of a citizen. They're renting. Okay, so thanks, Richard, for this. Let's see, we'll end this up real quick because Joey popped in here with a comment that said, David said that, but learning all the codes and how to vary the agreement for what he could do in the system, ultimately he could not defeat the system. This is talking about Neo. He varied the agreements for him and Zion, but he couldn't defeat the system. Because why? Because too many people love the system. They might claim that they hate it, but they don't. They don't. They want the human God. They love it, and they'll never come out of it. They want they want to revolt, really. So what Joey said was, if people in general stop to think for a second what actually drives the beast system, they might be shocked to know you only need look in the mirror. V for Vendetta. There you go, right? And the system is actually trying to help. They're putting out the movies telling you all the time. I love that thing the Oracle said. He said, how do I know I can trust you? She said, well, that's a pickle. You don't know whether you can trust me. You just have to make up your own mind. Well, then why are you trying to help? Why is the system trying to help? She said, I'm interested in one thing, Neo, the future. And if we're going to get there, we have to get there together. They're waiting for somebody to exercise the right of self-determination. They're waiting for people to do it, to take that much responsibility to get to that table up there. They've been there for a long time, which is why running plantations the way they run them, they become extremely powerful and wealthy. So, and they tell you in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars that doing this now, it's going to be hard for people to extricate themselves. Not because it's not easier. It's actually easier. They put it under peaceful settlement of dispute. I've seen how they've treated me in going to peace. And it happens all the time with people. Even I've got a nice little track record running now, people that I've kept out of prison because no one in 10 years that's been around me that listened to my advice has been, including me. I almost went, but I didn't. I went to peace with the system as ambassador, and that's when I was acknowledged, and that's what it took. And which told me that wait a minute, they're reading the same thing I'm reading, peaceful settlement. And I put it in my document so that it was seen. So they're waiting for someone to do this. But it goes back to what the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. It takes a lot of responsibility to have freedom. Look at what the 55 men had to do, right? Okay, so that's a good comment out of V from Vendetta. I like it. Why? Protection draws to it subjugation. Subjugation, protection. This is a Latin, how it's written in the Latin. The people always want some champion whom they set over them and nurse into greatness. This and no other is the root of which tyrant springs. When he first appears, he is a protector. Plato, out of the Republic. There's great quotes in here, Joey. A volunteer suffers no injury, because no one is obliged to accept a benefit against his consent. If he does not dissent, he is considered as assenting. Therefore, he who receives the benefit also should bear the disadvantage, because it is right that he who derives a benefit from a thing ought to feel the disadvantages of attending it. The real destroyer of the liberty of the people is he who spreads among them bounties, donations, and benefits. That's from Plutarch 2,000 years ago. The bottom line here is that people actually believe that they're entitled to rob Peter to give to Paul. The more handouts, the more tyranny. It's called responsibility. Own it. Thank you, Joey, very much. I need to take this part out right here. Now, okay, I already went over what I was going to discuss with you. That's what I wanted to talk about. This little thing right here, in international law, that understanding that these conventions have been going on for years. These are the protocols that have been laid down. They do meet the universal principles, because you cannot be a sovereign of one nation state, diplomatic of another nation state and be a citizen of another and expect to be afforded the treatment, because you know what you're doing? You're giving them the option of how they're going to treat you.
Right.
That's why they call it. That's why they call it standing. You have to stand. Anyway, any more questions on this?
No, that's a good start. Good premise.
Okay, I'm going to stop this, and we'll pick up with something else I want to talk to you about. Okay.
Okay.